Welcome, everyone, to the Week 6 Waiver Wire Show presented by the 33rd Team. I'm your host, as always, Josh Larky, joined, as always, by my co-host, Ryan Reynolds, and today we have a special guest. Many of you already know Nic Bodiford. He writes our Fantasy Takeaways piece on Mondays, and he writes our Waiver Wire article that also drops on Mondays as well. As many of you have noticed, Tuesday morning today was Injury Armageddon. We figured we had to get Nic on, since there is simply too much to break down. We'll get right down to it. The big injury is Justin Jefferson heading to injured reserve. He's missing at least 4 games with a hamstring injury. There's rumblings he might miss more time because of a Vikings fire sale. We're not going to get into any of that other than the fact that for at least the next 4 weeks, Kirk Cousins will be down as top option. When we look at Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne, I think the big thing to note is that KJ Osborne is not a target earner. Addison has been commanding targets on nearly 50% more of his routes per route than Osborne. So I think we probably all agree that Osborne is a fine ad, but that Addison has the real potential here. Nic, I'm going to pass it off to you. How are you kind of handling your bids on Addison and Osborne? Because believe it or not, there are some leagues out there where Addison is just floating on waivers.
Yeah, I think Addison's the kind of guy to just like dump it all. But prior to the potential injured reserve ruling for Justin Jefferson, I was recommending a mid to high 70th percentile fab bid. At this point, I think you just, if he's out there, you have a top 24, and I think this week a top 12 wide receiver. Just go get him. KJ Osborne, he's just not good. He's under a full. He's at like 0.86, a 0.82 yards per out run. Justin Jefferson is over 2 yards better at 2.87. Jordan Addison. That is Jefferson. I'm all over the map. Point is, Jordan Addison is a talented player. We've already seen the big plays. KJ Osborne, we have years of information on him. He's just not that good.
Yeah, one thing to note is that the receiver position is a bit different than running back. Where running back, you simply go, oh, this guy is not blessed with opportunities due to injury. Receiver, they actually have to be kind of good at football generally to pay off. Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you. How do you expect the Vikings' offensive game plan to change now that they are without kind of the best receiver in the NFL at this point? And Jefferson has been, to this point, 40% of their pass attack?
Yeah, I mean, at least long-term, Jordan Addison is the best shot to fill those shoes, but I don't think anyone can fill those shoes, for being honest. Hawkinson probably sees a little uptick in volume. And we've talked about this a number of times, Josh. You hate Alexander Madison. You hate the Vikings run game. They're a very pass-centric offense. This might change that a little bit. But yeah, for me, it's Addison's. We're looking for difference makers here. We're looking for league winners. I'm on a team, for instance, where Gabe Davis is my wide receiver 3 because Mike Williams got hurt. If Jordan Addison was available, I'm with you, Nic. I'm willing to empty the clip here on Jordan Addison to see what happens, but I would not expect Justin Jefferson level production personally.
The next big one, really unfortunate. Ryan and I talked about this yesterday, and this morning, apparently, like I said, it was injury Armageddon. De'Von Achane, it is potentially a serious knee injury. It doesn't look right now like he's going on IR, but everything I've read says multi-week, so I would expect him to be at least out for weeks 6 and week 7. And that brings in Jeff Wilson, who should be activated off of IR by the Dolphins. Last year, Jeff Wilson averaged 10 carries, 49 rush yards, 1.5 catches, 12 receiving yards, half a touchdown a game with Miami last year. Putting that all together, that's about 61 yards a game total and 10.5 fantasy points. Raheem Mostert averaged about 11 fantasy points for the Dolphins last year. I'd say, though, that this year's offense is just better for the Dolphins. So the way I'm thinking about Mostert, who's obviously not available anywhere, and then Jeff Wilson, who we are all trying to get, I'd say they both have high-end fantasy running back 2 upside, even while playing together. Kind of like what we've seen, actually, from Achane and Mostert these past couple weeks. Ryan, how do you see Wilson being reincorporated? It was a little bit of a pendulum last year when they played, where it was a Wilson game, then a Mostert game. How do you see week 6 playing out?
Yeah, I'd expect more of the same. Mike McDaniel comes from San Francisco, and before they got Christian McCaffrey, they were a ride the hot hand type running back room. I think we're looking at the same thing. We're going to get solid volume out of both players. 1 week, Wilson will get a bit of a spike. 1 week, most will get a bit of a spike. I could see Wilson getting a spike earlier, though, since he's fresh, so to speak, where Mostert's what, 30-something years old now, has a long injury history. So I could see Wilson seeing some pretty good volume over the next few weeks.
Nick, anything else to add here? I know we're all pretty gutted at this point with the Achane injury.
Yeah, so it looks like it's an MCL sprain. Running backs average 3.8 games missed per Adam Hutchison's injury report. So I think just planning on him going on injured reserve is the move. I think Jeff Wilson might have a little more PPR upside than Raheem Mostert. McDaniel has liked to use him on passing downs, but I think he's a limited player in a great situation.
Right.
Let's turn to the Chicago Bears. Khalil Herbert has a high ankle sprain. Travis Homer, who was third on the depth chart, has a hamstring injury. I think we should expect both of them to miss at least the next 3 weeks. And that brings in Roschon Johnson, who I should also mention is in the concussion protocol. I don't believe Roschon will miss time, though, given that the concussion happened on Thursday Night Football. So he has a little extra time to recover. And then this also opens up the door for D'Onta Foreman. My gut feel take, I think Roschon's getting 7 to 12 carries a game, 3 to 6 targets. That's probably a top 24-ish option most weeks. And then with D'Onta Foreman, I think Gus Edwards feels like a great parallel. I think you get 10 to 15 carries, pretty much nothing in the pass game. I see Ryan nodding his head to that. Ryan, anything else to add there? Or is that kind of how you're viewing the situation too?
I mean, one thing I'll say is Foreman's like the perfect Bears running back, like an ugly grinder back that, like you said, Gus Edwards is a real good parallel. I could see him leading the team in carries while Herbert's sideline, where Roschon Johnson sees higher value touches, definitely way more passing game work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Ryan says ugly, we just mean in terms of fantasy points. We think D'Onta Foreman's really handsome. Nick, I'm going to pass it off to you now. Anything else you want to add here on this Bears backfield that you wrote up pretty in-depth for your waiver column, which is free on the33rdteam.com?
I think the thing to monitor is just whether or not the coaching staff reveals who's going to get the scoring position role, because I think you guys already nailed it. Foreman is going to be in there on early downs carrying the ball. Roschon was already the 1A in the passing game. Whoever is trusted, when they're inside 10 yards, that's going to be the guy that we can kind of excitedly start every week. Roschon, bit of an atypical passing down back in that he's over 215 pounds. So no, size related concerns there, even though Foreman's like 240. But Roschon can get it done.
Let's now turn to the other big injury. James Conner has a knee injury. What I've read from reports is that he's a candidate for IR. I think we should assume that he at least misses weeks 6 and week 7 with potential for more. This opens up Amari DiMercato. Awesome name right there. And then Keaontay Ingram, another awesome name. Gotta love these. With Amari DiMercato, he was an undrafted free agent this year. He's got a little size, got a little speed. And that's kind of like Ingram as well, actually. Both guys hovering close to 200 pounds, running around a 4.5 40 time, which is a little bit above average. DiMercato was always a 0 in the pass game in college. They tried him out there. They had him run a lot of routes once Conner went down last week. It didn't really work. Extremely inefficient. The target share was always under 5% in college. I believe he was at TCU. And then with Keaontay Ingram, he missed week 5 with a neck injury, but he was limited in practice. I think he's returning. He also has the size and speed. He's a little bit of a better pass catcher, at least 22 catches, 3 of his 4 college seasons. My best guess, Nick, before I pass to you, is that DiMercato gets the early down work. Ingram gets a little more pass game work. I don't actually have a strong preference on who to pick up, so maybe you can help us out there. With them being similar size, I have no idea who's getting these high-value touches ultimately. Nick, do you have any clarity on this situation? Because I basically spilled out that I couldn't tell you who I prefer out of these two options.
So I'm on the other side of the fence. I think if they're gonna split it up, I think it'll be Keaontay Ingram on early downs. I think they want DiMercato when they're on passing downs, whether that is successful or not. I think that'll be the case. I think that DiMercato is a worthwhile PPR add. Keaontay Ingram can be stashed, should be stashed. As you mentioned, he's a big-bodied guy that touchdowns could come. The frustrating wild card here is that Jonathan Gannon has incorporated Rondale Moore in matchup specific situations. And if you go look through his like targets per route run rate, there are games where he's at like 12% or less, and then over 30%. And in those same 30% games, he's also getting incorporated into the ground game. We're not going to know what the coaching staff wants to do until we actually see it, but I think it's possible. Worst case scenario is Ingram early down guy, DeMercado pass blocking, and then Rondale Moore is functioning as like a hybrid pass catcher out of the backfield. I still think DeMercado is worth an add in full PPR formats as, a 0 RB, RB2 type of thing. But I like the ceilings and floors are very fluid for these guys right now.
Yeah, I'd say for anyone out there that has a pretty good team, just ignore the Cardinals. I think this is really if you're desperate for some kind of running back production at this point, where if you have a pretty good team, Jeff Wilson should really be who you have your eyes on if Roschon's available. The Cardinals guy is a little bit less exciting. Now let's turn to some other top ads. Let's talk about Jaleel McLaughlin. We talked about him last week. He's still available on a lot of waiver wires out there. McLaughlin now has the 2 best rushing performances by a Broncos running back this year. That happened the past 2 weeks. I personally like to roster players where there's some path to them being the lead back based on merit. And I think what we've seen from McLaughlin is that there's an actual case to be made here, despite Javonte Williams' draft capital, that McLaughlin should be the kind of the preferred ball carrier in this offense. Nick, what do you want to add here about a guy that you actually identified several weeks ago as being very, very interesting when he made the team?
Yeah, there were just whispers entering week 1 that they wanted to get him a bunch of work. But anyway, over 7 yards per rushing attempt, 26.7% targets per out run, over 1.5 yards per out run. If he wasn't 5'8", 183, I mean, his upside would be like top 15. And maybe it still is, just because he's like, he's one of those, as like Evan Silva would say, like good at the game kind of guys. If you are in need of a running back, he might be worth an ad over Jeff Wilson. I think they kind of rushed Javonte Williams back a little quickly. McLaughlin could just like take over the lead role for, I don't know, the next month or two, maybe even season long. I mean, he looks like an NFL player, like a legit NFL contributor.
Let's now turn to the Chargers receivers. Some leagues might have dropped Josh Palmer because he was on week 5 bye. And then in particular, a lot of people still just don't realize that Quentin Johnston is a round 1 rookie wide receiver, and that carries some upside. In week 4, Josh Palmer had a 33% target share. That's the game without Mike Williams. He had 8 targets. He only caught 3 for 77 yards, but he had 149 air yards, which was more than half of the team's total from week 4. If we look at targets per route run to kind of see, all right, who's a better target earner? Quentin Johnston's a touch ahead at 19%. Josh Palmer's at 17%. I think we can treat them as rough equals in that sense. Palmer's definitely the preferred ad if you want production right now. Still think Johnston carries a little bit more rest of season upside, just given that this is a big receiver with draft capital who can make guys miss after the catch at a much better rate than someone like Palmer. Ryan, how are you viewing the Chargers here? Since coming off of a bye, people generally go, this is when the rookies start to take off. I'm inclined to think Quentin Johnston might actually get a lot more usage in week 6.
Yeah, I think for me, it depends a lot on my team. Like say I'm 3-1 or 4-0, and I'm looking to win my league more or less. I'm definitely targeting Quentin Johnston more in those scenarios. I want production late. Similarly, if I'm set at wide receiver and I'm good at the flex, I'm more likely to stash Quentin Johnston. Where Josh Palmer, I don't think Josh Palmer's a particularly good player, but we've seen him see high volume 2 years in a row, especially if Keenan Allen goes down. He's going to be a pretty rock solid PPR value. So if you're really dicey at wide receiver 3 of the flex and you're 2-2, I'm probably targeting Palmer in the short term in those scenarios. Otherwise, for my teams, I prefer Quentin Johnston just like you.
Let's now turn to another exciting receiver, Josh Downs. Nick, we have Gardner Minshew in a quarterback for a while. I think I'm starting to get a little bit excited with Richardson on IR. How should we be viewing the speedy rookie?
I think Josh Downs has already established himself as Indianapolis's number 2 pass catcher and or wide receiver. He looks like he belongs in the NFL. I think in a PPR format, you can start him as a wide receiver 3. Might be pushing it, but the Jags slot coverage is kind of so. And we're going to get a lot more pocket passing, and we're going to get more green zone passing with Gardner Minshew under center. They did, I think, run him. They tried to do a tush push with him last week, but just taking Anthony Richardson out of the offense opens up more touchdown potential for everybody else.
Ryan, talk about Downs as a prospect. This was quote unquote your guy in those middle rounds of dynasty rookie drafts.
Yeah, I mean, guys with small catch radiuses that are separators are just guys that I like. Anthony Miller was another one that I liked. Josh Downs was on the higher end of that spectrum. Was kind of like iffy on his landing spot, but like Nick said, I definitely think Gardner Minshew is a better fit for him in the short term than Anthony Richardson. Passing volume goes up. Anthony Richardson's rushing equity in the red zone is off the table now. So I don't really view Downs as a red zone weapon per se. He's going to have to, you're not throwing contested catch balls in the end zone for Josh Downs, but he's right now. I have him on a team where Gabe Davis is my wide receiver 3 because Mike Williams is out, and he's my 4th option now, and he's going to be a matchup specific guy for me.
Let's now turn to Tyjae Spears. Before we get Nick's take on why he likes Spears based on a little bit of exciting trending upward usage, Ryan, how do you view Derrick Henry this year? Because we've talked a little bit about how the big dog doesn't quite look the same. What do you think the season-long plan is essentially for him?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. Last week against the Bengals, he looked quick again. This week, he looked a little bit more plodding. They're definitely letting Spears dip into his workload every week, which they have never really done before with a running back. Part of that's because Spears is a really explosive player and a different type of athlete than Henry, but it does seem like they realize that, we're entering the end days of the big dog, and, Spears is the long-term solution for the team at the position.
Nick, what do you want to add here about Spears and what you've noticed over these past couple weeks?
Yep. Career high 11 intended touches last week. He is top 8 in targets per route run rate at the running back position. I think that's among 22 NFL running backs with at least 15 targets. He can play. I said pre-show the knee is a little bit scary, but I think he can hold up for at least one season.
Let's now turn to some deep league stash type players. The first one I want to mention is Chuba Hubbard. The first 3 weeks of the season, Miles Sanders was getting 14 carries and 7 targets per game. And Chuba wasn't doing much because the work was going to Sanders. But these past 2 weeks, weeks 4 and week 5, Chuba's actually out-touched Sanders overall these past 2 weeks. Miles Sanders has struggled with some nagging injuries. He has never really been trusted for a full season outside of last year when the Eagles basically made him a grinder back. So I think there's a lot of paths here for Chuba where Bryce Young maybe takes a step forward. Chuba starts to eat in even more to Sanders' workload. We kind of need the Panthers offense to take a step forward as well for this to get more exciting, which is why I think Chuba belongs in this category instead of the other one. But something to monitor. I don't think he's the worst bye-week fill-in option at this point. And then one other note, Luke Musgrave. Some people might be dropping him. Green Bay has a week 6 bye. He had a 19% target share in week 3. Week 4, he left really early in the game with a concussion. And then he comes back on primetime last night, Monday Night Football, despite being benched for a couple drives due to some kind of communication issue, still managed a 24% target share. We like that he's getting targets. We like that Musgrave has very, very good speed for the tight end position. He should not be on waivers, even with the week 6 bye. Now, Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you. Let's talk about the 49ers backfield. We thought it was Elijah Mitchell. Now maybe it's Jordan Mason. How are you handling this, given that McCaffrey's 200 pounds? And I believe he's leading the NFL in touches at this point.
Yeah, it's just, it's like anything. We want premium handcuffs. I don't think we have a great answer there, especially since Mitchell's banged up. But Mason played well last night. His yards per carry is a little inflated because he busted a 25-plus yard run against a Dallas team that was done already. So I don't want to put too much stock in that. But just any running back, like Nick said, with Jeff Wilson, essentially. Jeff Wilson isn't exactly like an exciting player, but in this system, I want any running back that's going to get the ball. Right now, it looks like Jordan Mason's behind Christian McCaffrey.
And then Nick, I'm going to kick it to you. Let's talk about this Ravens backfield and a guy that you're a little bit excited about here.
Yeah, so Keaton Mitchell, he just offers one cut explosive speed, ran sub 4.40 in the pre-draft process. Gus Edwards, I think the knee injury and age are kind of finally catching up to him. He was always a really efficient rusher, but he's at 4.3 yards per attempt this year. Justice Hill is, I mean, maybe Keaton Mitchell just ends up being Justice Hill, like a very fast person who is able to contribute questionably, but we don't know that yet. Keaton Mitchell could be a good change of pace player. Justice Hill, I think most people are going to pay attention to the touchdown scored last week, but he basically did nothing for 3 or 4 years. And he also added a fumble to last week's box score. So I like early in the year, it was intriguing when Coach John Harbaugh was rolling him out there as the 1A to Gus Edwards 1B. But I think at this point, there's just a whole lot of nothing going on in the backfield, and Keaton Mitchell at least offers big playability. So I think that whenever he is ready to go, which hopefully will be this week, he's coming off injured reserve with the shoulder injury. Whenever he's ready to go, I think they're just going to give him 10 touches and just see what he can do, because they need another explosive element in the offense.
Guys, that is Nic Bodiford NFL on Twitter. Make sure you're following him there. Make sure you read his fantasy takeaways piece every week that comes out on Mondays. It's excellent. And also check out his waiver wire article as well, which comes out on Monday and then gets revised through Tuesday as well. Ryan is Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. We like to call him the more famous Ryan Reynolds over here. So Ryan Reynolds NFL. His power rankings are up on the site. Make sure you check those out. Come Thursday, he'll have expert picks and predictions for every game. And come Saturday, he'll let you know exactly what he's betting on in each game. And if you want fantasy rankings, I'll have those out later on the site today as well. And tomorrow, we are bringing back the rest of season rankings piece along with an updated trade value chart. I would recommend everyone check that out because I myself have already poured a lot of hours into that, given all these injuries that we're talking about and all the player movement that just needs to happen after a very, very eventful week 5. Everything there is on the33rdteam.com. It's free to read. And you'll find links to our Discord and all those articles. So if you have an individual question you want to ask Nick, Ryan, myself about waivers, trades, start sits, you want some player prop bets that we're taking each week, you can hop into the Discord. Let's talk about some streamers. At quarterback, Ryan, we've got Matthew Stafford facing the Arizona Cardinals. I'm excited. He's pacing for nearly 5,000 yards and just 17 passing touchdowns. He has Cooper Kupp back. I actually think because Kupp returned last week and they faced Philly, that Stafford's rest of season potential still a little bit hidden just because it was such a tough matchup. But ultimately, we have Stafford with two very, very good-looking receivers when it's Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua playing together. We've got Tutu Atwell stretching the field. I think he might be a borderline top 12 quarterback rest of season, where most leagues you could probably just start Stafford each week and it's really not going to hurt you. And then I think matchup specific like this week, I know I have Stafford ranked as a very aggressive top 8 option for week 6. What do you want to add here about how he's looked overall and how the offense changed with Kupp's return?
I just love Matthew Stafford. He's so good. He's, in my opinion, he's basically carrying this team to a large degree. And like you said, with Kupp back, Puka Nacua's, rock solid. We saw him have a big role still. Tutu Atwell brings speed. They have a very interesting wide receiver group all of a sudden. So, yeah, I agree. Like, pass-centric offense, defense is going to get shredded by better offenses too. So Nick said this a few weeks ago. He's at least like in the quarterback one conversation. For me, he's still a guy where if I don't have a premium quarterback, I want Stafford and someone else to play matchups with. But we saw Joe Burrow torch the Cardinals last week. I could see Stafford doing a lot of the same.
Same. And also, speaking of Puka Nacua, reminder that Nic Bodiford was on Puka Nacua. Ryan and I were a little more skeptical so far. We have been nothing but wrong on Puka. Yeah. We had to adjust early and often. I'd say we adjusted at this point. Kept him nice and high in my rest of season rankings. And it seems like that's paying dividends at this point, given that there appears to be a role for both Kupp and Puka in this offense. Ryan, we've got a big teardrop. The next streamer to discuss, Dak Prescott. He's at the Chargers on Monday Night Football. It hasn't been pretty this year. Dak's averaging under 13 fantasy points a game, career low 6.5 yards per pass attempt. But it's a matchups play. The Chargers have allowed nearly 22 fantasy points a game to quarterbacks. That's fourth highest. Tua had 466 yards and 3 touchdowns against them in week 1. Week 3, Kirk Cousins had 367 yards and 3 touchdowns. Even in week 2, Ryan Tannehill, he only had 246 pass yards, but because he only threw 24 times, he averaged over 10 yards per attempt against the Chargers, which was a season high for Tannehill. And then even Aiden O'Connell, who is one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever had the pleasure to witness, still managed to throw for 238 yards against them. When we look at real football, the Chargers have allowed 26 points per game to opponents. The game total for this one's at 50.5. Ryan, do you have faith in Dak to at least get back on track for fantasy in this game? I know you've been particularly harsh on him these past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've never been a big Dak Prescott guy. And, for me, he needed to come back and win that Arizona Cardinals game. And that's an unforgivable offense to me, where he needs to do something to get back in my good graces. I think there's a shot here. This game has some high scoring potential, but do I have faith in Dak Prescott? No, I don't trust him at all. I'd play Matthew Stafford over him this week in a heartbeat.
Guys, that's Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. He's watched every snap of every game since 2014 and still lives to tell about it. Nick, let's turn to our tight end streamer of the week, Logan Thomas at the Falcons. So I really like Logan Thomas this year. He's got over 6 targets a game, 4.5 catches a game. He's at nearly 50 receiving yards a game. He scored in 2 of his 4. He scored twice in 4 games. It's all very exciting. 12 fantasy points a game is tough to find. My expected fantasy points model based on usage has him at 10.5 expected PPR points a game, 5th best among tight ends this year. We've already established Logan Thomas looks pretty good. Now, Nick, talk to us about why this is just the juiciest of matchups at Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta, they're an interesting defense. By virtue of their talented offense, they sometimes are able to limit offensive production, but they just have not been able to do so for opposing tight ends. They in week 1, they were a bad unit, and that's when they had starter Troy Anderson. He's now on injured reserve. Caden Ellis and Nate Landman are the current Atlanta starters. Between the 2 of them, they have 1 full season as a defensive starter. They're basically just special teamers who now have starting roles. Per Sports Info Solutions, the Atlanta Falcons are allowing a 77.8% catch rate to tight ends. That's 10th highest, and are also allowing 63.2 receiving yards per game to the position. That is 5th highest. I think Logan Thomas can just get it done on volume. It's cool to see him come back from the awful knee injury that he had. I like him as a tight end 1 streamer this week.
Guys, that is Nic Bodiford NFL on Twitter. I love how Nick blends data, film, football, logic, and intuition. It's good to have the 3 of us on a podcast together. I'm enjoying this. Let's turn now to some defensive streamers. Let's start with the Dolphins. They get Carolina. Ryan has talked about how Carolina and the Giants kind of oscillate between who's the most unwatchable offense in the NFL this year. Why should we like the Dolphins this week?
Yeah, I have a scheduled tweet saying that thankfully the Giants and Panthers don't play each other in a couple hours. So I'm glad we're on the same page there, Josh. We don't have to get too cute here. We played the Lions defense against the Panthers last week. I think there's some danger in the Panthers are a winless team, and essentially they're going to have a surge at some point. I think that's probably coming after their bye in week 7. So Miami's going to hang points on them. Miami's going to play with the lead for in the vast majority of scenarios. So I'll take the Dolphins and Vic Fangio against a rookie quarterback that's struggling.
Let's now look at the Falcons. They face Washington. Sam Howell has taken at least 4 sacks every game. I think I'm just going to bring this up every week until he stops taking sacks. Sam Howell still pacing for 99 sacks taken on the season. The NFL record is 76. He's basically going to blow away the record by 30% at this point. And guys, 29 sacks taken in 5 games sounds made up. That is by far the most in the NFL this year. So I already like that we just know Sam Howell's taking sacks to begin with. Is there anything else that you like in this matchup for a surprisingly competent Falcons defense?
The Falcons defense is solid. I wouldn't call them a great unit, but especially if they play with the lead, like you said, the Bears, had a field day against Washington's front last week. The Bears might have the worst front four in recent memory. So the Falcons have more tools to operate with. It just boils down to, can they play with the lead? And if so, Sam Howell's just taking sacks every week. Let's stream against them as often as possible.
The three of us have a high stakes team we're co-managing. Nick, you decided we should scoop up the Detroit Lions defense last week, got us 7 points. That is not half bad. Why should we be interested in them again? They travel on the road to the Buccaneers, who are coming off of their week 5 bye.
Yeah, so Detroit's pass rush is getting the job done. 40% quarterback pressure rate. That's number 6 in the NFL. The Bucs are dealing with some offensive injuries. I think we're still waiting to find out how Mike Evans is doing, but 30-ish-year-old wide receiver with a long history of hamstring strains, got another hamstring strain. Don't love that. So the bet here is that Aiden Hutchinson and co can take care of duties, can get it done, whatever, against Baker Mayfield, maybe without Mike Evans. I like the odds.
And then one more that we like. We generally get a little nervous about Thursday night football games, but I think we should be looking at the Chiefs, being that they host this hapless Denver Broncos team. Ryan, what should we be looking for from the Chiefs defense potentially in this one?
I think the primary thing here is that the Denver Broncos defense is just falling off a cliff. They're terrible. We saw the Jets score 24 offensive points against them last week on the road. So what is Patrick Mahomes and company going to do to them? So in that vein, Russell Wilson's been fine. He's not as consistent as he used to be, but he still has his moments. So, turnovers, sacks, and a negative game script. Not only do they play Denver this week, but they play him in 2 weeks from now. So I think the Chiefs have some long-term viability as well.
Guys, before we get you out of here with a bold week 6 prediction from Nick, reminder that all of our content is free to view on the33rdteam.com. All our articles on the site have links to our Discord. Hop in there, chat with the three of us, get some prop bets, chat some DFS with Jordan Vanek. There's really no place like it. I still can't believe that our Discord is free. Other sites with similar Discords with similar services are often charging you at least $20, if not more, per month. Again, ours is free. Be on the lookout for my fantasy rankings hitting the site today, my rest of season rankings and trade chart hitting the site tomorrow. Ryan's power rankings hit the site today. His expert picks and predictions come out Thursday. Nick has his waiver article and fantasy takeaways already up on the site, the hardest worker in the industry on Sundays and Mondays when it comes to producing content. Nick, this was a great show, and the listeners want something a little bit spicy for week 6.
So bold take for week 6, Zach Charbonnet finishes as a top 24 running back on the week, setting the table here. The Seattle Seahawks are down one offensive tackle. They might get their other one back, but kind of TBD on that. Charles Cross, I think it is, has the toe injury, and he's supposedly returned to practice, but Pete Carroll, he loves to lie. So speaking of Pete Carroll being a lying liar, Geno Smith is dealing with some sort of a knee injury. They're playing coy about what exactly it is. I saw Dr. Physical Therapy Jeff Mueller suspect that it might be a PCL strain. Go check out his timeline for more information on that. But the matchup sets up well for the Seahawks to run the ball. Cincinnati's front 7 are allowing 5.3 yards per rushing attempt. That's third highest in the NFL. Zach Charbonnet's 5.0 yards per rushing attempt, number 13 among NFL running backs with at least 20 attempts. I think this matchup just blends very nicely for an attempted ball control day from Seattle. I think Joe Burrow is going to burn it down on the other end in a good way. But Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker, I think they're both going to have really nice days. And Zach Charbonnet, he's a really good rusher in scoring position. I think they might slowly ramp up his green zone usage as the season progresses, and I like him to score this week.